Hello, sweet people. I am back with another episode of this podcast, Listening Conversations with Plants. It's been a year since the last episode. A lot has happened, I think, for all of us. I've been feeling called to come back and share about the journey that I am on right now with Blue Lotus, which is a 6-month commitment. And while I'm sitting here, my belly is like talking, and my nervous system is like regulating itself down. So that's really nice. Yeah. So today I want to share about my experience with these 6 months, kind of initiatory journey with Blue Lotus, and I'm in my 2nd week, and it's already very big, and I'm wondering what 6 months is going to do. And it's new for me. I've never done such a long journey with a plant for that amount of time. And usually I'm also very private about it. I tend to do it more traditionally, more like a traditional dieta in isolation. I won't be on any technology. I'll remove salt from my food, like really removing all sort of noises and really zooming in, only me and the plant. And this time for 6 months I have chosen to do this commitment and this relationship in life. And so I feel both humbled and I feel excited and also nervous about sharing about this. I feel for me what is kind of sacred and what is secret are usually very close connected. At least they have been for me for many years. And so the deeper journeys I have with plants, I usually don't share details. And so it's like, wow, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm gonna start sharing while it's happening, and that feels very new for me. Yeah. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Eva Maria. Part of what I'm really devoting my life to is connecting deeper with nature, connecting deeper with myself, and coming into presence with the divinity in whichever form that I find it. And one of the ways that I do that is by connecting deeply with plants. And I do that in my work where I help people connect with plants, and I do that myself all the time. So with the tea that I drink, with the food that I eat, with the plants in my garden, but also I'm bringing people for Nordic dietas out in the forest with Nordic trees and Nordic plants, and I've been living and working in the Peruvian jungle, training with my indigenous teacher there. And so that's really kind of the baseline, or the way that I've come into presence with plants. And there's this interesting question for me that keeps kind of coming back to me, which is like, why Blue Lotus and why now for me? Because I guess there's part of me that constantly is saying, well, why work with any plants that aren't growing in my garden in that way that I really want to connect deeply with the land here and what is here? And I feel that's like such a reclaiming of ancestral roots, and it's such a power, and it's so beautiful. And so part of me is like, then why Blue Lotus? And one of the perspectives that I've been feeling into with that is that it's kind of like saying, well, if you have green available, why not make all your clothes in green? Where Blue Lotus is like, well, if blue is also available, why not make clothes both with green and blue? Like, why do you have to choose in this world that we live in right now? Why do you need to choose something from one space above the others? Like, I'm kind of, it's interesting for me because with some of the plants that I work with, that could be Blue Lotus or cacao, some of the other plants that are coming from further away, I tend to have I have a lot of respect for not just overusing the plants. In general, also the plants here, but with the way that nettle, for instance, is growing in my garden, it's like it's a different kind of abundance that is like there's so much nettle, and she's like, just take whatever you need, and so there's like so much, but it feels differently when it's a plant coming further away, and also a plant that, like Blue Lotus, is more scarce. So, which is interesting, since for me it's also such a plant working with abundance, right? But I mean scarce in the way that it's not growing wild as much as it has been before. And to my knowledge, so one of the beautiful women that I've connected recently with who work with Blue Lotus in Egypt, she only knows one place it's actually growing in the Nile. And I thought it wasn't growing in the Nile at all. So one place, right? And so it's a different scale. And so I'm both like very careful with how do I work with this plant? How much do I work with, in what quantities, and why? Right, so the question of why Blue Lotus, and I guess for me it really came as a calling. She came to me in ceremony, and I didn't even know it was Blue Lotus. I was like, I thought it was another plant, and I was like, what is this energy? And I was working in Peru at that time, and I was talking with my teacher, and he was like, oh, no, yeah, that was not the plant you thought it was. This is Blue Lotus. I'm like, whoa, that's Blue Lotus? And then I started connecting with the plant, and I was in awe, right? I feel so much like a water person. I feel very connected to water as an element. All the elements, but like for me, water, like if I was a bender, airbender, whatever, I would definitely be waterbender. And so, yeah, she came in, and I started guiding her. I started working with her on a daily basis, and I've been working with her for years now. And this commitment now is really for me, so it's a 6-month commitment, right? So I'm going to be in communion with Blue Lotus for 6 months. And what that means for me is different things. But one thing is that I'm really trying to weave the energy of Blue Lotus deeper into my being, like having this energy help activate the wisdom that is already inside me, kind of activate light codes or whatever name we put on it, but like helping me step deeper into myself, and also kind of merge with this plant in that way of stepping deeper into the wisdom of this plant and being in service of this plant as well. So I see Blue Lotus as a teacher of mine, as a guru, and I am in service of that plant. So this is both 6 months for me to deepen my relationship with the plant, getting to know her even better, and also my healing journey with this plant. And then I'm going to end it by facilitating an 8-week devotional journey with Blue Lotus. It's a Blue Lotus initiation for others, where we're going to have a pilgrimage to Egypt. So it feels very aligned for me to how I work with plants, but also how I see Blue Lotus, of this very embodied plant. So it's like I am going through 3 months myself, and then I guide people through 3 months, right? And then I'll have 6 months in total with that. Yeah, and so some of the things that I'm already, so I'm in week 2 now, and some of the things that I'm already noticing is really how sensitive I'm becoming. Things can easily get, I feel that like this sweet spot between overflow and overwhelmed is very tight. And like a lot of people or a lot of things, then I'm like, whoa, suddenly realizing, okay, I'm here cultivating plant energy, and I'm not used to doing that in interaction with people. Again, I'm used to doing it alone. And so it feels like this really deep calling to bring the sacred into everyday life, bringing ceremony into everyday life. So I'm kind of balancing this kind of, on one hand, simplifying everything, and I'm not watching any movies. I'm not, there's a lot of, let me quote unquote noise that I'm taking away, that I'm removing. But not as much as I'm used to. Like I'm still eating salt in my food. I'm still like eating different things. And if I am, let's say I have my birthday in a couple of days, we might make a birthday cake, right? And I'm gonna have that. So I feel there's this calling is more for me to be very conscious and present in whatever I'm doing. So it's less like what I'm doing, it's more how am I doing this with Blue Lotus in a more present and sacred way. And it is this interesting balance for me already of like what do I remove? And I can see because I'm used to just removing everything and being in a kind of a, if you don't know what a plant dieta is, then maybe you know the version of a vipassana, so like a plant vipassana, like a solitude sanctuary where I go in the forest alone, or I like sit here alone in my little hut and just like for days and days and days and meditate and fast and really go deep into it. And so this time I can hear that voice in me that wants me to do that. And what's really interesting is I think usually I would follow it, but what I'm seeing now, I'm starting to notice the nuances of that voice. I notice the nuances of that voice, and part of the nuances that is a judgment. That's like my inner harshness. That's actually not the plants and not alignment, but that is saying, oh, this is out of alignment. Don't do this. And that kind of harsh voice, or very disciplinary, almost like military voice, has been able to hide itself easily in a very disciplined practice, I would say. And not that I know it has been there. I know this voice, but now I'm really seeing it, and I'm really kind of having a dance with it. Another thing that I'm noticing is also there's some really old traumas that are coming up. And I did not, so I don't know what I expected, because I felt from the beginning on 6 months is a long time. Like daily, I'm spending hours daily with Blue Lotus, meditating, being in practice with her, right? Going through initiations, like really deep with this plant. But somehow I had not expected as fast to start going into traumas. And one of the traumas that has come up for me that feels vulnerable to talk about, but that I actually do want to mention, is that when I was a teenager, I got a pregnancy. So it was my first real partner. It was my first sexual partner. And we simply didn't know enough about protection. So we just thought that like these pills are just as good as condoms, like everything is just the same. So we used that type of protection, and bam, it didn't work. And a long story short with that, of like being a young woman having an abortion, and the shame that was around that, and how I did not feel I could talk with people about it. But what was really traumatic was that when I told my school teacher, he told his daughter, who was in the same school. So suddenly there were rumors everywhere of someone in my class being pregnant. And also some of the people, because I was a young woman and I didn't know where to go and talk, so I was talking with some of my girlfriends, and they shared it with others. So on top of this really hard situation, really griefful, like there was so much sorrow, I had to deal with everybody else's judgment of a small town where everybody was judging me. And I was like, wow, man, that's just like to put, like as a heavy situation, and then you just put shame on top of a heavy situation, which we're really good at also in this country, I guess in the world in general. But that kind of pattern for me, and that's really what I've been going into here. Other things as well, but like these days of like, whoa, this like heaviness of I've been judging myself so much through the years for telling these people. I've been like, why was I so stupid? So like, wow, for years I've been walking around judging myself for being a young woman that wanted to talk about a hard situation, instead of placing it where it belonged, which was, hey, this is a hard situation. Let's not shame this girl for this hard situation. Like, wow. And I've been through this again and again and again, but somehow she chose to come to this now. And I think it's very aligned as both me and Stefan are slowly slowly easing towards wanting to be parents. And so this trauma comes up. And I feel, for me, when I'm connecting with plants like this, there's like this really importance of not getting angry. Not from this like shanty, don't get angry place, but like don't direct anger at people. Because when you're cultivating deep plant energy, if you're using that in a destructive way, like that is what will be created. So it's like only use it in a loving way. So if there is anger, anger is beautiful. Like it's boundaries. It's saying no. I love working with anger, but directing it not at people specifically. And usually I kind of have had a tendency to take a lot of my anger work outside of the plant space. Like, let's take that in a more therapeutic space. Not that plant space isn't therapeutic, but just like I have different tools that I work with in different settings, right? And so there has also been a lot of that coming up. And it's interesting for me already. I'm like, okay, we're going there. Like, wow, Blue Lotus, we're really, okay, this is where we're going. So, and I find this with all plants, but I also find it with Blue Lotus, like this really, when we connect with them deeply and when we really allow them in, there's a lot of root work happening, like going deep into restructuring our roots, right? And I'm definitely feeling that. And at the same time, this experience right now is my past couple of years have been deep root work. I've been doing so much work. I've also been finishing a psychotherapy education, right? So I've been doing work with like the plants, with therapy, with my partner, with like with my family and my relationships and my friendships, and like everything has just been with my business. Like everything has just been like needed a proper foundation. And so while there is this trauma coming up, and there are these like, in that way, root things are like deep patterns that Blue Lotus is weaving into now. What I'm also feeling is that right now, at least, this feels like a journey that's way more about going upwards, up towards the stars, up towards like really the rise of Blue Lotus, like rise of consciousness. And I've been working with plant consciousness for, I guess it's soon 10 years. And for me, there's always all directions, right? It's multidimensional. But mainly my focus has been very close to the earth. It's really been about connecting back to nature and like homecoming in that way. And these months I'm feeling the other direction. And I'm feeling it a lot with Blue Lotus. And this morning I was sitting and meditating with Blue Lotus and with cacao, and I was in this like beautiful initiation. I was back in one of the temples in Egypt that we're going to go to in February, and going through something that was really beautiful and really deep and really connected to all of the processes. Yeah, so right now I'm in awe of this process, and I'm also feeling, wow, 6 months is a long time. I'm like, oh, did I think this through? And I, in some ways I did, and in some ways I didn't. I feel like that with all like diets or deep plant connections. It's always like, you don't know what you're going into before you're there. Yeah. Maybe I want to share a little bit about how I see Blue Lotus. So Blue Lotus is a water lily. I cannot say the Latin name. I'm gonna write it in a description. Nympho bli 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 li 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 li. There's a nice Latin name that I've forgotten right now. And one, like, is very curious. I was, so I'm pretty nerdy with the plants that I work with, and the way that I get to know plants is that it's kind of one at a time. So I didn't like study herbalism in the way of like, here are 10,000 plants, get to know them, and just like, there's a plant that comes to me again and again, and then I'll be friends with it, and then I get to know it really deeply, and then I work with it and share it, right? So that gets me maybe 5 new plants a year. And so my apothecary is like slowly growing, but it's from this like deep connection, deep friendship. And I do feel that like rather I like I like the experience of a smaller apothecary with a depth in it than like all these different plants from all over the world that like that you know a little bit. Not to underestimate, like if people, you know, really need ashwagandha or whatever, you know, to regulate their nervous system, that's perfect. The way that I do it is really, there is something in the relationship and in being physical with the plant, usually. But that isn't always possible, like with Blue Lotus, for most of us. So unless we're going where it grows, which is also really beautiful, then it is more of a dry thing here. And I'm taking out the Blue Lotus, so for those of you that have it on camera, you can see this is a dried Blue Lotus. For me, the smell is divine. It's almost like candy in the good, healthy kind of way. And so I was nerding about this plant, and I was watching somebody doing a scientific research on Blue Lotus, and they were looking at some of the specific genes and some of the specific proteins and like what they were doing, and they were trying to so it was a very nerdy thing. But one of the things that I got out of it, which wasn't about the proteins and stuff, was why they were looking at Blue Lotus specifically. And it turns out that it's one of those plants that are not it's one of those plants that are very original. So it's one of the flowers that are like one of the oldest flowers. So it's not, you know, if you know kale, for instance, kale can cross-pollinate with everybody. It can go like with rape seed and like it can just, so for instance, the kale in our garden, it's almost impossible to say what species is it, because it's so, you know, it really just constantly shifts and changes, right? Where Blue Lotus is not like that. So I'm sure you can make, and I know you can make fusions, but in general it looks like it had done a long time ago. So kind of like horsetail or bracken or something like that. So basically, when we're saying it's an ancient plant, it actually is one of the most ancient flowers, if not the ancient, but at least like a really old species, which is why they were doing the research on it in the first place, because they were saying, how was these plants, these original plants, how were they multiplying, right? How is it going into seed, and what determines which part of the genome determines what in the seed production and in the flower and in the blah blah blah. So it's like, okay, wait, so physically it is one of the ancient flowers. Makes so much sense, right? In some of the Egyptian creation myths, you know, like the Blue Lotus that comes up from the primordial waters, and like there's so much richness there. So it's like, okay, we have one of the oldest flowers here. That's beautiful. And so it has been holy in many different traditions, one of which would be the old Egyptians. And I don't think there's a temple in Egypt without Blue Lotus on the walls, right? Papyrus and Blue Lotus. But Blue Lotus on the wall is like a very sacred plant, as I understand it, but I have not gone down those roads. It was also very sacred in Tibet. But again, like I haven't gone down that road, but as I understand it, that's one of the other places where there's like a long lineage of people working with Blue Lotus. And it seemed that it's also for the Mayans, is what I've heard. Again, I haven't gone down that path with Blue Lotus, with the Mayans. So I don't know that, but I wanted to mention it that's what I have heard. So it grows from the mud, right? It's a water lily, so it grows from the mud through water, and then it comes up and the flowers comes up for like 3 days, and then it goes down underwater again and start becoming a seed pod, which then I think it takes maybe a month, if I remember correctly, or 28 days for it then to like pops out all its seeds in the water and then like spread them to new places. Yeah. I feel kind of completed for this conversation. Let me just feel into if there's anything else. Yeah, I'll make another episode when I'm a little further in my process, and maybe the structure will be different, or maybe something else will change. But at least for now, it's really nice just sharing a little bit about where I am with Blue Lotus right now. And if you have any specific questions about it, you're welcome to let me know. Also, if you're watching or listening to this in the autumn of 2024, I have an online free Blue Lotus meditation the 23rd of October. And our Blue Lotus initiation journey, 8-week devotional journey, starts the 21st of January 2025. 2025. Yeah, so reach out if you feel a call for that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this conversation. And I'm looking forward to the next one. We're going to share some more about what's happening, maybe some more about the structure, and we'll see. I kind of like it when it's kind of structureless like this, and I just get to jam with what is. It feels very real for me. Yeah. Sending you all lots of love. Whew.